Is Travis Hunter running away with the 2024 Heisman Trophy? Also, Georgia still able to tighten the screws, craziness in the Big 12, and much more. It's the College Countdown. I'm your host, Josh Neighbors, here on the Rogue Media Networks. Find us on Twitter at CC Podcast JN. Let us know what you all think of our question of the day. Is it Travis Hunter's Heisman to lose? Is the Heisman race over? You all can find me on Twitter at Josh Neighbors _, as well. Once again, like the video, subscribe to the channel. We appreciate it when you all do all of those things. And once again, guys, we go through the weekend and whatnot. But we like to attack stuff and kind of link it to big picture things. Think about what everything that's happening in college football honestly really actually means, as opposed to, it just being a result. So thinking about that today, the Heisman Trophy race is what we focus on the very beginning of our Tuesday top 5. It's Travis Hunter's Heisman to lose. I think that is reflected across the board in fan opinion. I think it's expert opinion. I think it's on the field play. I think it's reflected in the odds. Right now, over at the FanDuel Sportsbook right now, Travis Hunter is a minus 350 favorite. The next closest individual to him is Jeanty at plus 390 out of Boise State. Then Cam Ward's at plus 1400. Curtis Rourke is at plus 3000. Dylan Gabriel, Jalen Milroe are also there as well. Jackson Dart is there. Shedeur Sanders, Kate Klubnik, Drew Aller, Will Howard is also up there too. So Travis Hunter also has the most remaining games that feel like they could have a huge impact on this race because, number one, at Colorado, he can help win their way into a college football playoff. So I do think that's a big benefit for him. But we also have to acknowledge what he brings as a player. You think about the Heisman Trophy winners, and we go through the last few years, it really has become a quarterback award, right? It's become an award that we give to the best quarterback every single season. And I don't always believe it's the best thing. I think it's good that we acknowledge the performances of other players, other positions and whatnot. It is most outstanding player. And yes, the quarterback does have a huge impact on that. But when you think about winning championships and what it always means, it's not always a championship player, right? Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, obviously. Yeah, we have guys like Bryce Young who impacted championship, seasons, right? He wins in 2021. The Heisman Trophy, but he won the CFP in 2020. He did not win a championship that year. Devontae Smith, yeah, championship level player back in 2020. Joe Burrow, 19, yeah, same thing. But it doesn't always have to lead to a championship. Lamar Jackson's Heisman Trophy winning season is also evidence of this as well. But you kind of want to see some form, of championship, I think, to kind of go along with it. And what this player meant to a championship. He's going to mean everything. I mean, he is their best player all the way around. I will say this. I think Shedeur Sanders is the most important because he is the trigger man for an offense that's got him. It's got Travis. It's got good wide receivers and like an okay offensive line, but they can't really run the ball. And their defense has gotten better, but really it's on him to get the ball to playmakers despite whatever is happening going on around Shedeur Sanders. So he's the most important guy. But Travis Hunter is the best player on that team. He's the best player in the Big 12, and he's the best player in all of college football for my money, right? And so he'll be the first receiver since Devontae Smith to win the award, and he'll be the first defensive back to win the award since the 1990s, since a DB has won this award. Let's see. Yeah, since 1997, right? Charles Woodson wins the award as a cornerback. And then the only other cornerback, only one cornerback has won this award. So he'll be the second cornerback to win the award. And then I think for wide receivers, he will be Devontae Smith was the last one. They list Eric Crouch as one. Desmond Howard won as a wide receiver and punt returner of as well. Tim Brown, wide receiver. They've listed, Tim Brown as a wide receiver in 1987. That's why 1987. Tim Brown, right? That's when he won it. So yeah, a pretty short list of guys, and he's going to be the first DB / wide receiver, that we've seen win the award. I think we see some running backs / wide receivers back in the day, maybe win the award, but the first guy. And look, once again, the numbers are not staggering. You're not blown away by Travis Hunter and what he's doing as a wide receiver, right? There's other wide receivers across college football who have had better seasons. He right now, let's see, where is he in receiving this year. So he's 14th in receiving yards at 911. When it comes to receiving touchdowns, he is tied at number 8, with a bunch of other guys. Right. And then receptions, let's see where he is this year. He is 6th in receptions, doing that on the fly there. So, he's across the board there. But the fact that he's doing all of it, he's doing all of these things, and he's going to end up over 1,000 yards. He's barring injury, obviously. He's most likely going to end up over 10 touchdowns. He's got 9 right now. He's also run for 1 as well this year. So he does have 10 total touchdowns. But that impact that he brings, be able to play both ways and just be able to see a player like that. I think it's good in this modern era of quarterbacks. We've been appreciating quarterbacks over and over and over with this award, that we've got a guy who goes to a school like Colorado, comes in the year as a two-way player, right? And as hyped as maybe the best player in college football. Two-way playing probably hurt him maybe a little bit last year, with injuries and whatnot, but delivers on expectations of what he could be. He's shown how good of a player he could be. Yeah, I mean, is it odd to think, hey, NFL, I think he's just probably you're going to play him both ways. There's definitely play corner in the NFL. I think covering guys in the NFL and then also trying to play wide receiver in the NFL is going to be really challenging with how good the coaching is, trying to stop a guy like that, trying to go at a guy like that, seeing if he's tired and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, I think he's going to end up being the first pick, right? Because he's got a lot of value. And I mean, if you are a team drafting really low and you got a lot of needs, well, he's going to fill some kind of need for you, most likely, right? He's going to do something that your football team most likely needs. And so because of that, I think he's showing that value, living up to that hype. There's something to be said for having that hype and living up to it. Being a guy who people talk about for Heisman and going out and doing it, playing the positions that he does, right? He has to have the ball come to him, both on offense and on defense. And so, Shador is a huge part of that now. Shador finds it, but that's because he's open and he makes himself available and he's dependable and reliable. Can he be caught? Yes, if he gets injured, number one, he can be caught. Ashton Jeanty's had such a good season that you'll see him in New York, right? He's just been so consistent. He has been so damn good this year. So it'd be crazy to me if we don't see Jeanty in New York City at the Heisman Trophy ceremony. So we're going to see him there. I just don't know if there's anybody else who can catch him. If I look at the quarterback stats and think about who at the quarterback position could do it. Cam Ward has been phenomenal this year. 32 touchdowns, 6 INTs, right? And they've needed every single score of Cam Ward's. He's also run for 3 touchdowns, so he has 35 total touchdowns. But his decision-making at times can be, precarious. I mean, I understand why. He's put under a lot of pressure, right? Jackson Dart is up there too, but I don't think he's qualifying, competing for it. Dylan Gabriel, but the numbers aren't that gaudy, in my opinion. I do think there is a case to be made for Jalen Milroe, because while he is 42nd in the country in yards and only thrown for 15 touchdown passes, all the while throwing 6 interceptions, he's also ran for 17 touchdowns. So he's got 32 total. I mean, if he has a couple big games here down the stretch, we could be talking about a guy who's at 40 total TDs, right? And, I think that could put him in a big position. But, last 2 weeks, 2 weeks, he has not thrown for over 200 yards. They haven't needed him to against Mercer, right? But has the 4 touchdown rushing game against LSU where he was unstoppable. Was good enough against Missouri, I guess you could say. Tennessee game was really, really rough for him. And also the Vanderbilt game. I mean, it wasn't like he was bad, but he could not get things going. That's how, running the ball. But that's how kind of things have gone this year. And that's why I feel like, hey, it's Travis Hunter's to lose. The Heisman odds reflect that. Jeanty's been going crazy and the odds really haven't changed. I do think Jeanty's got the profile maybe to, well, I say that as a college football fan. You never know at these general voters. They just know the kid from Boise is kind of what they hear. And they know that I think a lot of folks know they had a close encounter with Oregon earlier in the season. But I don't know how much he's going to get, if it's going to get him over the hump. And Travis Hunter obviously has the hype machine that is Colorado and very deserving of everything that he's got. So let me know if you all agree, disagree, where you guys think it's going to go. Up next, Georgia can still tighten the screws. Man, they showed it off. I think the big thing about this performance is that looking back on it, I'm not trying to break down the game here because it's already passed, but looking back on it, the fact that Georgia's able to tighten the screws, the fact they're able to get the ball out fast. The big difference in this game was they kept a clean pocket for Carson Beck. He was not sacked. Part of that was design. Part of that was performance by both teams. And then you've got also on the other side of things, the fact that, they did get to the quarterback 5 times and they did make life uncomfortable in Nico Imalieva. And when you watch him throw, Nico, it's either a rocket to a guy, it's perfect, or it's a rocket over his head. I mean, he is inconsistent. They made him feel the pressure. They made him feel the heat, and you could tell that. And that was kind of a vintage performance by Georgia, where it's like, the offense just kind of gets some steam, gets going, right? I mean, they were tied going into the half, but they didn't score in the first quarter, and they get 17 in the second quarter, and then they get 7-7, and the defense shuts them out. That kind of felt like some old school Georgia there. Georgia's a bit more vulnerable than they have in the past, but everybody's a bit more vulnerable than they have been in the past because the talent is a bit more spread out this year. So a vintage Georgia performance, I think, is something worth noting because of what it could potentially signal. I'm not saying it's, go time and everything's going to be hunky-dory for the Georgia Bulldogs now. I think it's worth noting that they have the potential to be back. They can reach back and grab one of those clamp you type games. At least the second half they did. BYU might be in some serious danger. College football playoff rankings. So if you look at the rankings and you look at what they had last week, right? Last week, the college football playoff rankings have BYU as the number 6 team and the 3 seed. All right, they're going to get dropped tonight in the new rankings. That's 100% going to happen. And you'll probably be watching this, after they come out, whenever. Right? But they're not just in danger of being dropped from the rankings. BYU is in danger of being dropped out of the Big 12 championship game. They are currently tied for first place with Colorado, but they had a 1-game lead on the Buffs last week. That 1-game lead is dissipating and might, it's evaporated now, I should say. And they are in serious danger of it becoming, of jumping out of that picture because look, they've got Arizona State this week, 5-2. Iowa State's 5-2. And BYU has Colorado left. Last game of the year, they've got Houston, which could be tough. We don't know yet, but there are chance to put Arizona State away out of this. Is there? I expect it to be a close game, but you look at close games, 38-35, you could argue they should have lost to Oklahoma State. Had a bit more of a slower grind against UCF, but they did win 37-12. They were up big, and they kind of let them grind back in, but you see that there. Right, Utah 22-21, and KU 17-13. You also take a look at SMU 18-15, Baylor 34-28. They've played in some close games. They have played with fire this year, multiple occasions, and TCU did that. But the difference between the TCU team that made the national championship game and this kind of Cinderella Big 12 run we're seeing from BYU is that TCU had like legitimate NFL talent at multiple places. They had it at defensive line. They had it, some guys in the defensive line. They had guys at linebacker. They had guys in the secondary. They had guys at receiver. They had guys at tight end. They had guys in the offensive line. They had guys at running back. They had guys everywhere over the field who at least did get drafted and looked, and on a field against Michigan, who recruits pretty well, looked apart. They really stuck it to Texas that year. We had a bunch of NFL guys on the team, and physically they kind of beat the hell out of Texas. And so that's one thing they could do. And BYU's defense, don't get me wrong, they continually play great, but their offense lacks a punch. They just can't be as explosive, and they're not a super great running team. You look at this, it's not like LJ Martin is having a ton of 100-yard games. He goes for 101 against UCF, 120 against Oklahoma State, but a lot of these other rushing performances are kind of colored by, hey, get the job done. And they've been really good at kind of exploiting other teams do make mistakes and whatnot. So BYU is playing a team in Arizona State right now that's brimming with confidence. And that game at 2:30 may well decide the Big 12 season, because Arizona State has Arizona left. Arizona's 4-6. Arizona needs to win both their remaining games at TCU and then against ASU to go to a bowl game. So that could be for a spot in a bowl. But ASU could lock in here, and Kenny Dillingham's Arizona State Wildcats could be in the Big 12 championship game in his second year after all the sanctions that got put on them. What a job it's been from Dillingham. But and he could put his stamp on it by knocking BYU out and being the surprise newcomer. But the fact that there's as much on the line as there is in BYU Arizona State this weekend is really exciting. Partially because BYU, they're not fraudulent. I think we kind of know what they were, but if they had a stinker as bad as they did, and they did have a stinker offensively, we knew this could happen. So I wouldn't call them frauds. I just don't think they're as good as everybody else is. But they've had a great year, obviously. Number 4, here comes Tulane, folks. The Green Wave has been rolling recently. And if you look at the CFP rankings from last week, and I can't wait to see what they look like tonight, but if you look at the CFP rankings from last week, what you'll see is Tulane is way, way, way back of let's see if I can get the CFP. They love to put the rankings in the wrong spot. If you look at these CFP rankings, Tulane is 8-2, right? They jump in here and get the job done. They hammer Navy this week because they've got better athletes than Navy. They've got close losses to K-State and a close loss as well to Oklahoma. And they're chasing down Boise State, right? That is what they're going to do. Now, if Boise loses in the Mountain West Championship game, it's over for them. But they could very well lose to Oregon State. I know Oregon State has not had some awesome year, but they could lose to Oregon State. They probably won't lose to Wyoming. Let's just say they do. I mean, there is a good chance that Tulane could leapfrog them and jump them. That Oregon loss is really impressive from Boise State, but here comes Tulane. If Army gets the dub this week against Notre Dame, I mean, all bets are off, but I don't think anybody believes that they will. Army's still in this thing, but like until they beat a team with elite athletes, I'm kind of out on Army. When a service academy does that, I'm kind of out on Army and Navy, like as a good contender. I mean, they're really good teams this year, obviously, right? But it seems like right now it's Tulane and Boise who are the top candidates. Once again, Army could do it. But it's going to take, I mean, they're going to have to beat Navy, and probably beat Notre Dame, and beat Tulane to have a shot. They'd be undefeated at that point, but I just think it's too, I mean, they'd have the best win out of everybody, but I think it's too much of a hill to climb. Plus, I mean, we probably don't think they're going to beat them. But Army could throw a wrench into this. I'm just wondering how far will Tulane jump, because they looked really, really good, and they're playing better, and I think neutral field, I'm taking Tulane. I'm taking Tulane. Yeah, duh. What am I doing here? Taking Tulane. Last one, Brian Kelly. Yikes. We'll talk some more about this later this week. But the question of, hey, hard reboot, or do we have to look at this thing a lot closer when it comes to Brian Kelly's LSU Tigers? I think that question needs to be asked. I'm not saying they got to think about getting rid of Brian Kelly, but what happened this past weekend was a big yikes. This season's been a big yikes. I think you could chalk it up to this. They've had teams built around quarterback play the last few years, and they had a special quarterback the last 2 times, right? Joe Burrow, obviously special quarterback, and then Jaden Daniels is a special quarterback. Two of the last 3 guys that they've had have been special quarterbacks, right? And that's been pretty obvious. But they don't have that anymore, and it's costing them. And I'll tell you what, man, like this thing could be a lot worse for LSU. They are 6-4. Guys, they got outplayed by Ole Miss. They're very, very fortunate that they won that game. They were fortunate to win the South Carolina game. This season could be a whole lot different. And to be honest with you, like A&M kind of whipped their ass second half of that game. Alabama thumped them from the word go, and Florida outplayed them. So those games, like those were not, you could flip those around results. The most convincing win they've had this year is 34-10 over Arkansas. That's kind of the most convincing victory that they've had this year. And so I would say that the concern is there, right? Concern really is there. And yeah, I mean, it's easy to look at what they did. Like they had Max Johnson, and they also had, who was it before? Because Nussmeier's been there for a while, right? Then Max Johnson, Miles Brennan as well the year before that. And also TJ Finley got in the act. But they are I think Nussmeier is better than Brennan. I think Nussmeier is better than Max Johnson. I think he's better than all of those guys. I think they're putting way too much on him, and I don't think he's as good as the other dudes. But I mean, they're running for 4 yards a carry this year, and they've got 12 rushing touchdowns. It's not what we're used to. The rushing attack has just not been what we're accustomed to seeing from LSU. And Brian Kelly on the sideline yelling at a guy, "Who the F do you think you are?" Woo! Boy, that thing is going to get, it could get ugly in a hurry, right? It could really get ugly. All right, folks, that will do it for today's show. Let me know about any of these topics we talked about. Let me know what you all would like to hear me talk about. We'll talk tomorrow about the CFP rankings, kind of look at where things will shake out, a lot of these races, conference races, and a whole lot more as we're getting down to you-know-what cutting time in the season. Fire me. I'm reading the Jets fired GM Douglas, Joe Douglas, a disappointing season. Find me at Josh Neighbors _. You all can find the show wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube as well. Like the video, sub to the channel as well. Talk at you folks manana.